Hello, Mark Smith, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, and I want to talk a little bit about curriculum here in the district. And I wanted to talk about three things primarily. First, what it is that I've learned in my first year, as I'm recording this here in June of 2019. Second, I want to talk about some of the goals that have been established as a result of that learning. And then third, just an overview of some of the philosophical underpinnings that are going to drive the curriculum work here in the district over the next few years. So in the first part of the year, I spent a lot of time just listening and trying to meet with people and get a sense of where things stood and what had happened in the 5 years that I hadn't been in the district. And one thing that I learned was really just about how much work had really been done in such a short amount of time when the district was coming together. As the Harwich curriculum and the Chatham curriculum needed to come together to form the Monomoy curriculum, and that's just focusing on the curriculum. But when I really think about that, and I learn more about how much had to get done in such a real compressed timeline, it really is remarkable. And as a result of that, there are definitely some areas that we can continue to grow. When you have to do that much work in that short of a period of time, sometimes some things get missed, and that gives us some areas for growth. So as I continued learning, I kind of have summarized our areas for growth based upon the learning that I had done into three different buckets: consistency, file organization, and communication. So for consistency, we really are consistently inconsistent in the way that we have our curriculum documents organized. And again, it's a product of the amount of work that had to get done and the time that it had to get done. But what formats we're using, what it is, how people understand the different elements of those particular templates, what a complete unit looks like. There's several, or we're really inconsistent in what it is that we're presenting to the public as far as, and to each other, quite frankly, as curriculum. Second is around file organization, so where things are located. They can be stored in really, quite frankly, anywhere, depending upon who did what work and when they did it. It's really stored all over the place, and there's no centralized access to get to our curriculum as a district. You'd think somebody who was the director of curriculum instruction and assessment would easily be able to put his or her hands on the curriculum for the district, and there really is no centralized way to do that. And the last is around communication, how we're communicating changes in for curriculum, and how we're soliciting input for how those changes are going to happen. So that drives four goals for us. So the four goals are: first, to create a clear, organized, centralized access for our curriculum. So this is supported by a Google structure and a domain that's separate from any one person in the district. But ultimately, what this means is, and the goal is for for us to create in our office a central or an individualized teacher level document. So if I'm a seventh grade teacher of math, I will get a seventh grade math Google Doc shared with me. This is the ultimate goal. And that Google Doc will then have links to all the curriculum documents. It'll have a link to the scope and sequence, a link to any units, a link to the assessments, etc. Will all be linked off of that one document, so that the teacher is just responsible for maintaining and storing that one document. All the links and where all the stuff is stored, that's all done separately, and the teacher doesn't have to worry about that, but he or she has ready, easy access to the curriculum documents needed to be successful. The next is to have a repeatable process for communication, for feedback on curriculum development, for revision and implementation. This will be done a lot in work with the instructional leaders, and we've started some of that work with the instructional leadership team and the Ed Council already. And next is to get an accurate accounting of what it is that we have and what it is that we don't have. And this will continue to be ongoing, but I have a goal that I really don't want people to repeat work that they've already done. What I really want to do is get to that fourth area, which is identify where it is we still have work that needs to get done, and so that we can do that work. So oftentimes I get the question about why is it that we need curriculum? Um, and really it's driven by one common reality. And that reality is that I haven't met a teacher yet who feels like he or she has enough time in a given year to teach everything that it is has been laid out for him or her in their respective standards. And so what ends up happening is if we don't have enough time to cover in the year, and part of this process, we're going to be thinking really deliberately about how much time we actually have. How many minutes per day? How many actual days in the year do we have to actually instruct? Because it's not 180. So we really need to be thinking about how many days are we actually going to have kids sitting in front of us. And then we need to collectively sit down and make some decisions, because if we recognize we're not going to get to everything it is that we're going to get to, we need to make a collective decision about what it is we're going to cover and what it is we're going to prioritize, how we might link things together to develop overarching themes that help kids better understand things, and as a result, what it is that we may not get to. Because if we don't do this collectively, then we're going to be forced to do it individually. And if we do it individually, we're going to do it in our classroom individually, and our neighbor's going to do it in his or her classroom individually, and the next classroom, and the next classroom, and the next classroom. And what we end up with is students with different sets of skills. So here's just an example of a generic fifth grade, ELA classroom. Not It's all fictional, obviously, but if these teachers don't have a common curriculum on what it is that they're going to prioritize, they make individualized decisions. And on an individual level, any one of these decisions seems like strong, rational decisions. These teachers made, good decisions based upon the kids, there's lots of reasons to support them being good decisions. The only problem is they were individual decisions. So these 4 students pictured here, represent 4 different classrooms filled with students that, as you read the little narratives underneath, they have 4 different sets of skills. And they're going to move on the next year and be mixed into all sorts of different 6th grade classrooms. And then we're going to have all sorts of splinter skills. And as this happens year after year after year, it creates students with wide gaps and a whole bunch of different skills. And we waste time the following year trying to fill those gaps, instead of us all understanding what it is students are going to move on with from one year to the next. And it's important for us to think about that because we are in the business of learning. We need to be focused and thinking about what it is that we want students to know and be able to do. We need to make that collective decision. It is not about teaching, it is about learning. We need to be having those conversations regularly about what it is that we want our students to learn. And that's where a backwards design or an understanding by design concept works. And that is the major philosophical underpinning of our curriculum development, is thinking about what it is we want students to know and be able to learn first. And the reason we want to do that is because we need to have a destination. But if we're going to figure out how to get things there, we have to know where it is we're going first. And if we use an analogy of an airplane, I don't think any one of us would get on an airplane if the pilot didn't first know where he or she was going. And we shouldn't expect to develop curriculum and learning activities if we don't first know where it is we want kids to go. And that's the collective work. That's where we have to come up with that collective scope and sequence first. What are the big ideas that we're going to cover? In what order are we going to cover it? And then we shift into the second part before we get to lesson planning and we get to thinking about the activities that the kids are going to do in the classroom. We have to think about how are we going to know if they know it. Again, I don't think any of us would be comfortable with the idea of each pilot making an individual decision on what a safe flight looks like. What is a successful landing? There should be some standardization around a successful landing. And the same criteria for our kids. We should have a successful criteria for knowing what it means when students get where it is we want them to go. How are we going to know they have learned what it is we want them to learn? So, where are we going? And how are we going to know if the kids are there? Those are our first 2 priorities in curriculum development. Then we get into the learning activities that are going to get students there. Thank you, and I am happy to discuss curriculum with anyone at any time.